Hello everybody, I hope you're all keeping well. Over the past few years, a movement has been growing, and that movement really came to the front this past summer. That was a movement to remove any form of commemoration to anyone that was previously, many centuries ago, involved in the slave trade. Now, whatever our political ideologies are regarding whether or not it's the right thing to do to remove them, I think there's one point we can all agree on. As Western society and civilization has progressed in its feelings and understanding of humankind, and we look back at the way in which these slaves were treated, we don't look back with pride and say, wow, that was amazing. Rather, we look back and say, that was terrible. How could a human being be treated in such an animalistic fashion? At the beginning of this week's parsha, the Torah tells us of what to do when we acquire a servant, a slave, somebody to work in our houses, somebody to work for us. How do we treat them? And the Torah tells us something very interesting. We have to treat them as being on par with ourselves. We can't treat them as less than ourselves. In fact, we go as far as to say if we only have one pillow in our house, we have to offer that pillow to our servant. We can't treat them as inhumane animals. Rather, we have to treat them as equal human beings. Just recently, I was discussing with one of my classes what were the sins that were committed by the generation of the Tower of Babel. Look back into Parshat Noach. The Tower of Babel was another one of the sins that were done by humankind at that time period. And the rabbis come out and say one of the potential reasons why it was so bad what they were doing, it was they built up a big tower, a massive tower, and as it got higher and higher, bricks became harder to bring to the top. In fact, bricks became the currency. Bricks became more important than human life. If a person were to have fallen down and died whilst building a tower, okay, we'll bring someone else back up there. No problem. If a brick were to fall, oy vey! Tears, mourning, the loss of a brick. And I asked my students to think, what messages can we learn from the sins of previous generations? And a very powerful message came out. Items are not more valuable than people. There's nothing that's more valuable than a person. One of my teachers, when he was a newly married man, he was a rabbi in Israel, and he wanted to have guests for Shabbat, and a few months after being married, he invited a couple of guests around for Shabbat meal. As he did, he put a nice chinaware, a nice crisp white tablecloth, his wedding cutlery and crockery on the table, glasses are on the table, fine, beautiful glasses on the table, and a bottle of wine to go with the meal as well. And the meal, they came in, they made kiddush, they sat down for challah, and the chicken soup came out. It was delicious, amazing meal. And he poured everyone some wine into their glasses. Unfortunately, one of the people was a bit clumsy and knocked over his glass of wine. So my teacher didn't make a fuss, but he could tell that the person was feeling a bit uneasy. He just spilt crimson red wine all over a beautiful white tablecloth. It's difficult. He felt uneasy about it. So what did my teacher do? He very subtly took a drink of wine and put his cup right down at the edge of the table. And as he was talking, he's waving his hands a bit around and consciously but subtly knocked over his own glass of wine and made a big joke about it. Look, we all do this. And the guests felt a lot more at ease. The funny story is, as The lesson, as the meal ended, he turned to the guest had gone home. He turned to his wife and said, "Look, aren't I a massive tzaddik? I made our guests feel much better." His wife scowled and turned back to him. "Well, next time, don't spill the wine all over my finest Shabbos dress. But don't worry about that." But we have to recognize people are more important than items. And there are many times we get attached to things, get attached to items, and we get upset when something happens to them. But that cannot be at the expense of another person. The Torah teaches us this parsha the importance of every single human being. Let us remember that and take it with us to treat everyone with utmost respect. Shabbat Shalom.